What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Danielle Hallen and I am back with another true crime video. So in today's video, we're going to be speaking about the unsolved, devastating murder of 17-year-old Maggie Long from Bailey, Colorado back on December 1st, 2017. And this case I have known about since a few months after it occurred. It was brought to my attention by one of you guys. And I remember very specifically sitting in my apartment office Googling this and just being so confused and frustrated as to why there was no information out there about what was going on, because, and you'll kind of understand this when I get deeper into the information, it just felt from the get-go that this is one of those cases where awareness was going to be absolutely essential. That was likely what is going to solve the case, but there was absolutely nothing out there. The police were not releasing anything. There was no information to go off of, so I just didn't have anything at all to create a video out of. And so it ended up staying on my mind throughout this entire time. Unfortunately, Maggie Long was burned alive, and my sister died after suffering severe burns on 90% of her body when I was in 5th grade. And because of that, Maggie's case was just continuously in my head of, is there something going on? Are there new updates? What is happening? Is it solved yet? And so over the past couple of years, I've occasionally Googled it to see if there's been any progress, and there's pretty much not been anything happening up until this past year. And I just thought about Maggie the other day and decided to look it up and saw that there was some movement, and now I finally have some information to really throw out there to you guys to hopefully raise awareness on this case and bring some sort of tips and information forward, because I do genuinely feel that's what's going to ultimately solve Maggie's murder. There's a $75,000 reward in this case from both the FBI and Park County Sheriff's Department, and there are sketches of 3 separate individuals that are believed to be involved, 2 car descriptions, so it's not like we're working off of nothing anymore. This is crucial information. Someone might recognize some of this. But before I get into the details of today's case, I first want to say a huge thank you to NordVPN for partnering with me on today's video. NordVPN, if you are not aware, is an award-winning virtual private network that helps you protect your private data while you are browsing the internet. We are all attached to the internet at all times, on our phones, on our laptops, any smart device, period. If we have apps running, the internet's going on in the background, and that just makes it that much easier for third parties, hackers, trackers, you name it, to get their hands on all of our personal data. With 5,500 servers and 60 countries, there are no limits at all to where and how you browse, and with the ability to connect up to 6 separate devices all at one time, all of your electronics can be safely secured. NordVPN also has a strict no-log policy, so nothing that you do is tracked or shared. So a lot of those really annoying ads no longer are an issue anymore when you use NordVPN, and you never have to sacrifice your speed when it comes to having this security. Your connection stays lightning fast, so you're able to keep on streaming with absolutely no interruption. Plus, a pretty awesome perk of NordVPN is it allows you to access content that you otherwise might not be able to in your country. NordVPN is super easy to use, so even if it sounds overwhelming and you don't fully understand it, it's nothing that's going to be complicated for you to deal with. There's a browser extension, there's an app on your phone. You literally click one button, it turns the VPN on, and then you just don't have to think about it anymore. It's a set it and forget it kind of thing. Right now, you guys can get an exclusive NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/Danielle. It's absolutely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and honestly, in my personal opinion, internet safety is priceless. Safety is a huge topic on this channel, and I feel like internet safety, just the need for it, keeps on growing and growing and growing. I've seen it even in the past 3+ years that I've personally used NordVPN, so I highly suggest it to you guys. It's definitely worth giving a shot, so make sure again to head to nordvpn.com/Danielle. And another huge thank you to NordVPN. Brands like NordVPN allow me to do what I do, raise awareness for these cases, and also contribute to the families wherever I possibly can. Now on to the details of today's case. So Maggie was living in beautiful Bailey, Colorado at the time of her murder. And from my brief research, Bailey just seems like this sweet, quaint little town just outside of Denver. It's a population of about 8,000 people, so it's not huge, but it's also not teeny tiny, and it's known for things like hiking and the arts. It's just a really good place to settle down and raise a family. It's well known for its family businesses in the area. So that's likely why Maggie's family decided to settle down in Bailey, Colorado. Maggie's family are Chinese Vietnamese immigrants. From what I have seen, they came to America just over 40 years ago, and they have worked incredibly hard to build their life the way that they want to build it. Maggie's parents opened up a handful of restaurants in Bailey, Colorado. They also had a handful of investment properties. Their home where they raised their children was absolutely beautiful. It's 6,000 square feet, and it's tucked down a quarter-mile driveway off of County Road 43, just on the outskirts of Bailey. When it comes to Maggie, Maggie was special, and you can tell in the way that everyone talks about her. This community suffered a huge loss when they lost Maggie. And every single interview where her friends are speaking about her, I mean, even the principal of her school, everyone has nothing but great things to say about Maggie. She was the youngest of 3, and she had the absolute purest heart. She was 17 years old at the time and going to Platte Canyon High School. She was in her senior year, and she was going to turn 18 on December 17th, 2017. But unfortunately, that was a date that Maggie never made it to. Maggie was described by her sisters as an overachiever. Her sisters had set the bar pretty dang high throughout their childhood into early adulthood, and they laughed in interviews saying that Maggie wouldn't just reach that bar, but she would full on surpass it. Like, this girl was flipping up and over the bar and setting new ones. She was always the first to volunteer to help out at school. She was in the student council. She participated in multiple extracurricular activities. She was always busy and doing something positive. She had great grades. She worked really, really hard. She was just this model student, citizen, sister, daughter, you name it. Maggie had a very selfless tradition on her birthday. She, instead of spending time on herself, would gather up all of her friends, and they would spend hours making hundreds upon hundreds of sandwiches to go and pass out to the homeless population in Denver. That was just Maggie, I feel like, in an absolute nutshell from all of my research. While she did spend time, bettering herself and furthering herself and reaching her goals, she always made time for every single person around her, regardless of if she knew them or not. Maggie could be found more often than not studying or working at one of her parents' restaurants, and when she wasn't there, she could usually be found in a theater somewhere. Maggie had a massive passion for theater, every single aspect of it. Not only did she participate in her schools when she had the opportunity, but she also was a huge part of the Venue Theater in Conifer, Colorado. She even worked really hard at one of her parents' restaurants to be able to afford her own tuition to put herself through the program, and this December, the day of her death, was absolutely no exception. Platte Canyon High School had a yearly holiday concert that they would put on in the beginning of December, and Maggie played a huge role in planning for it, prepping for it. On December 1st, the day of the concert, Maggie was set to work the VIP lounge. But Maggie, being Maggie, this could not be just a regular experience where people just sat in a VIP lounge. She actually had made treats and things to give to the VIP guests at the lounge. So after school that day, it was a Friday, she told her friends that she was going to head home very quickly to change her outfit. She was going to grab all the snacks that she had prepared for the VIP lounge, and then she would be back to kick off the holiday concert. This was like one of her favorite times of the year. But Maggie never showed. From what I've seen, and there's just a few kind of different versions that I've seen online of this, Maggie's sister had gone to the family restaurant, and her mother mentioned not being able to get a hold of Maggie. I've also seen that Maggie was potentially supposed to work there that night, but that doesn't make sense because she was at the concert. Either way, no one could reach Maggie, and this was entirely out of character for her. As you can imagine, based on everything I've described, Maggie was very responsible. She was always easy to reach, so when no one heard from her for a few hours, there was definitely reason for some concern. So after a while of no contact, Maggie's sister decided to go to Platte Canyon High School because they were aware there was this holiday concert going on and that Maggie was going to be there working the lounge, and that was the best bet at finding Maggie to kind of clear up what they probably believed was just a case of like a dead phone phone or something along those lines. So when her sister arrived to the high school and was told by Maggie's friends that Maggie had left earlier on, said she'd only be gone an hour, and now it's hours later and she wasn't back, this was a huge red flag right away. So after a few more unanswered calls to Maggie's phone, her sister was in the car rushing to the family's house. According to Maggie's sister Connie, during this time, she was receiving some strange text messages from a tenant in the family home. So as I said, the family's house was about 6,000 square feet. There was like a mother-in-law suite. There was also this apartment, I think it was, on one of the top floors or in the attic of the home. I don't know the exact layout, and it's not incredibly important, I don't believe, but basically there was a portion of the home that was an apartment that they did rent out to someone. Renter was texting Maggie's sister saying that he was hearing a lot of strange noises coming from downstairs in the main family home. Connie knew that something was not right. She said in an interview, quote, "I drove over to the house, and when I got closer, my gut feeling just got worse. I drive up as close as I could, and that's when I saw the chaos, the fire trucks. Our house had burned." So at 6:59 p.m. that night, December the 1st, 2017, Park County received a 911 phone call from the tenant in the Long home saying that someone had been in the home destroying things and had eventually ended up setting the house on fire. It only took a matter of minutes for both Platte Canyon and Elk Creek first responders to arrive at the Long residence and begin to put out the fire. Now, the tenant did thankfully manage to get out of the home. They were completely fine from my understanding, but no one had any idea how any of this started. There was just so much going on all at one time. At this point, I don't believe anyone knew really, other than Maggie's family, that she was missing and now their house is on fire. Someone was hurt inside of the home. And even more eerie, the perpetrator or perpetrators had just left the home, meaning that police and first responders missed them by just a matter of minutes, and it's very likely that they passed them along County Road 43. When Connie arrived to see all of this going on, her family home on fire, not knowing where her sister is, she looks in the driveway, and there is her sister's car sitting in the driveway. So in a desperate attempt to try to locate Maggie, posts started being made on social media begging anyone to come forward with information about where Maggie may be, when the last time they saw her was, the last time they spoke to her. It's not very clear at this point if anyone believed Maggie was in the burning home. I know that if I were to come upon that scene and see that car in the driveway, that would probably be my first thought, but it does seem that there were other attempts, plenty of them, to get a search party going to look for Maggie elsewhere. It honestly just, there was too much going on all at one time. I'm sure nobody could wrap their head around what was happening. I know that Maggie's family did attempt to go to the police or the sheriff's office to put together a search party for Maggie. They were told when they asked by Under Sheriff David Wohlers that there would not be a search at the time because the police were trying to figure out if the fire was connected to Maggie's disappearance, and Maggie was essentially labeled as a missing person. Fire was put out around an hour later, so it was about 8 p.m., and investigators were able to start going into the home shortly after to try to figure out what on earth had happened. Why did this home catch on fire? Was this arson? Was this accidental? Is there any connection to Maggie's disappearance? Is Maggie in there? And it was determined pretty quickly that there was evidence of a burglary. This was not just a random fire. This was not accidental. This was a burglary, subsequently covered up by arson, however, not successfully. So right away, the CBI, or the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, was brought in to help investigate the scene. Now, this is where there are a handful of issues within the community and onlookers when it comes to this case. I do want to state that it seems that remains were in fact found the night of the 1st, pretty much right away when investigators went into the home. I have absolutely no idea if the family was immediately notified, but this caused issues because remains were found that night of the 1st, but police stated afterwards for the next couple of days that Maggie was still missing and there had been no remains found in the home. like very specifically no remains. I have seen that a victim's assistant did in fact come out within like 45 plus minutes of the fire being put out, and usually a victim's assistant is brought in to speak to the family. And then the following day, on December the 2nd at around 10 a.m., a Park County coroner was also called out to the Long family home, which again is indicative that remains had been found. But as I said, despite these two things, it was publicly announced that Maggie was still missing and no remains had been found in the home. On December 3rd, Under Sheriff Wohlers told the city of Bailey that there was absolutely no threat to the public. They had nothing to worry about, and they were encouraged to come forward with any information about Maggie's disappearance or the arson. He again stated that they were trying to see if there was any connection between Maggie's disappearance and the fire at the Long home, and also stated that they were focusing on the time around 2:30 p.m. that Friday and 8 p.m. in terms of Maggie's whereabouts. Now, that is incredibly frustrating. I completely get why people are upset that they were told that there were no remains, there was this, that, and the other. But I will say, just as like the benefit of the doubt, that police can't just confirm the identity of someone without DNA testing or dental records, something along those lines. As you can imagine, it can be incredibly damaging for police to just see remains and automatically make an assumption. It can seem super obvious, I get that, but to protect the family, loved ones, the person that's missing, there has to be some order of how things go. However, I do understand why people are upset, because police came out and blatantly lied and said there were no remains found in the house. I feel like it would have been better to just say, we can't speak on that, when they were asked, or there are remains that we're trying to identify. For all anyone knows, it could have been whoever set the fire, but for some reason they just chose to lie completely, which I do understand people's anger about that. So the following day, December 4th, there was a gag order that was then put in place, which confused people a lot as well. When you look at it from the community's perspective, we have this 17-year-old girl that is missing that nobody would in their right mind ever have any reason to harm in any way, shape, or form. This well-known, sweet family's home was set on fire in multiple locations throughout the home. This was scary. This was terrifying. And when you have that happen and then police are like, oh no, it's fine, but there's no remains, we can't find the girl, but also we're now going to have a gag order so that no one can speak about it, ends up just encouraging a bunch of speculation and worry and all sorts of things. This completely prevented authorities from saying anything to anyone, including the media, but they reassured everyone that this was simply to prevent sensitive information from getting out there into the wrong hands. There was information that they had that only the perpetrator would know, and they just did not want anyone to know that information yet. At this point, after the gag order was put in place, the FBI was also brought in to assist in the investigation, as well as ATF, which is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. So we've got like the whole shebang here, trying to figure out what exactly happened in this arson and where Maggie Long is. But then just days later, the town and Maggie's family finally got some answers. On December 7th, so just a few short days later, the gag order was lifted, and it was announced that on December 4th, remains that had been found in the home on December 1st had been identified as belonging to Maggie Long, and her death was being investigated as a homicide. According to police, it was believed that Maggie had in fact gone back to her home to change and to grab these snacks, and she unknowingly walked in on a robbery in progress that escalated and ended up leading to her death. When investigating the scene, they found that there had been an altercation of some sort, so it seems that Maggie tried to fight off her attacker or attackers, and unfortunately shortly after this, a fire was started and Maggie was burned alive in her own home. There have been no sensitive details released at all in terms of Maggie's death, which first of all I understand just out of respect for the family and Maggie, but also because I'm assuming there are specific details in terms of the way that she died and what happened to her that again only the perpetrator would know. As the community was trying to digest the loss of this young woman, a public bolo ended up being sent out that caused another round of panic. So we already have the community that's like, wait, you told us that there were no remains in the home, but you knew there were remains the entire time. Why did you lie? Honestly, people went in on the sheriff's office and everyone involved, all the investigating agencies, and some of the press conferences was. Even the reporters seemed infuriated that there was just this blatant lie going on out there. But this is what the bolo itself said and why it caused so much more panic. Quote, the bolo is going to be for a late model 90s to 2000 light colored minivan, possibly driven by a white male in his 20s. Homicide occurred during an arson, and the suspect driver may have some flash burns, as well as gasoline taken from the house, a large case, AK-47, 2,000 rounds of ammo, and a 9mm Beretta handgun. Please be advised the subject is considered armed and extremely dangerous. So this bolo goes out after finding out that Maggie had now been burned alive, killed in her own home. Now the community that had been specifically told days prior that there was no threat to the community is now hearing that whoever did this went into the home, stole an AK-47, a 9mm Beretta handgun, 2,000 rounds of ammunition, and is considered armed and extremely dangerous, which completely contradicts what was put out there before, that the community was safe. There was nothing to be worried about. Shortly after this bolo went out, the undersheriff came on again and made a second statement saying that this bolo was actually never even supposed to be in the hands of the public to begin with, which I find very interesting because they had put this huge gag order, which you just don't commonly see in situations like this, to prevent information from being leaked. And then the second it's lifted, quite literally the day it's lifted, a bolo goes out that's not supposed to be leaked to the public. But either way, this is what he had to say about it. Quote, the bolo was not intended for public consumption. It was supposed to go out through a confidential law enforcement source. I can't confirm what the media are reporting. It's really quite disruptive to our investigation. Because of the problems that is caused, we're going to have to reconvene the task force and decide how information for a public clarification will be crafted. So I honestly feel like that's kind of the only reason a lot of this information even really got to the public, is because this bolo was accidentally released. So at this point, more details of what happened in this home and what was taken became public knowledge. So as it already stated in the bolo, there were the 2 guns that were taken, ammunition. The case that they referred to was actually a safe, a green safe, and there were also jade figurines that had been taken from the home. Quite a handful of things had been taken, which indicates that this likely was going on, this robbery, for some extended period of time. Sheriff Wegner also announced that they had put together a task force at this point, as well as a tip line to try to solve the case as quickly as possible. And again, they attempted to reassure the community that everyone was safe and everything was fine. So the investigation continued on. Within a few days, the FBI and local authorities decided to set up an operation in an attempt to gather tips and raise awareness. They decided to set up roadblocks along County Road 43, and they set up these roadblocks right outside of the Long family gates. So as I said, their driveway was a pretty long driveway. I'll show you guys on Google Maps, but they also had a gate at the front of their property. And they set up the roadblocks here to stop anyone that was driving by either direction to hand out flyers. These flyers had photos of the stolen items on them, but I do want to state very quickly that these are not the exact items. It's just lookalikes. So it was an example of the things that were taken from the home, and also information on Maggie's murder and the arson. So hopefully people would recognize something, keep an eye out, and maybe tips would come in. They also decided to set up a similar table at a nearby gas station to hand out as many flyers as possible there as well. And from this point, they also started to go through a massive list of potential suspects. As you heard from the bolo that was released, clearly someone saw some sort of vehicle leaving the scene, because police put out a bolo for a light-colored minivan and also mentioned a male possibly in his 20s driving the car. While police didn't actually address this or say anything about this until like 5-6 months later, clearly someone called in a tip, and from my understanding, it was the neighbor. So this neighbor allegedly saw a minivan driving away from the Long residence that day right before first responders arrived, and the way that the person was driving in this car was very erratic. They crossed over into oncoming traffic like a bat out of hell, attempting to drive away. So this is where that information came from. So investigators began to look into males in the area that could possibly be of interest. When I was doing my research, the media seemed to portray this in a way that authorities kind of willy-nilly went to any and all homes in the area and were just DNA swabbing males 15 years old and older, which definitely took me back a bit. I was like, okay, that seems like a little aggressive and odd. But when there was a press conference, they were able to state that that's not at all what was going on. They were not just randomly testing people, 15-year-old kids. For some reason, that is how the media portrayed it. In reality, these were individuals that could have some sort of connection to the crime. So that could be a criminal history involving violence, a criminal history involving arson, things like that that could tie into the crime. It was not just absolute randos, but this also indicates to me that there is potentially DNA that was found at the scene, and police have not confirmed that, but since that was one of the first things that they immediately did, I have a gut feeling that hopefully they've got DNA from one perpetrator at least. But from my understanding, all of these people ended up being ruled out. I think ultimately it was like thousands of individuals that were questioned, had DNA testing done, and not a single person at all was found to be connected to the crime. By January 18th, 2018, so a little over a month after the crime, Park County Sheriff's Office announced that there would be a $15,000 reward, and by May 4th, a couple of months after that, this reward was increased to $25,000. Yet there still seemed to be absolutely no answers. But there was something important that was released that day, May 4th, 2018. A sketch of an individual believed to be involved in the crime. The man in this sketch is believed to potentially be involved in the arson and murder of Maggie Long, and investigators believe it's possible that this individual lived in the community since this location is very specific where this house is, and when they released this picture, they asked for anyone to come forward if they recognize this person and for everyone to share it as far and wide as possible. They also pointed out, as I had stated prior, that these individuals could have possibly suffered burns or something from the incident. They also may have changed their appearance after this happened. They could have been acting strange before and after this occurred. It's a possibility that this person changed jobs or suddenly decided to move away after this. Behavior is incredibly important when it comes to catching individuals that could have been involved in something like this. So the FBI really tried to drive it home that if you notice anything strange about someone you know or someone around you, a coworker, a family member, a friend, anyone during that time that maybe did any of those things and possibly matched the description of this person, to call it in. They also released an image of the van that you heard about in the bolo. Now again, this is not a direct photo of the vehicles thought to have been fleeing the scene. It's just an example. At this point, it's no longer described as a minivan, but a Chevy Astro. And they also released a photo of a truck, like an older truck that had come in through a separate tip. A little over a week later, on May 18th, investigators ended up coming back to the public and telling them that they believed the Long family home had been specifically targeted. Lead investigator Jones said, quote, "We feel strongly that whoever did this probably had a strong feeling that there were items of particular value to them that would have been in the Long household, and that's why they targeted that house." And that was kind of the biggest thought and question to me during all of my research. This home is in such a random, strange place. It's off of a county road. It's got a gated entrance. It has an incredibly long driveway. Most of the driveway is just out in the open, which is risky. And then from what I can see on Google Maps, and it might change based on the seasons, but you can't even see the Long family home from the road. So it just seems incredibly risky to decide to pick a random house off of this county road, like hope a house like this would be there with all of these things inside of it, and then go past a gated entrance, drive up this very open driveway. It really doesn't seem like this was a random choice at all, but who on earth would have known that there were guns and ammo and a safe, and why these random jade figurines? Were those just grabbed along the way? Someone thought maybe there'd be value in them. This also, like I said, was not a quick burglary either. There were guns taken. There was a safe taken, like a whole safe. It makes me think a lot about the restaurants that Maggie's family owned. Was there someone there making sure that the parents were at the restaurant and not at home? Was it just a guess that all of these things were there? Honestly, I have no idea. But either way, police say that while the house was definitely targeted, it's not likely that Maggie was a target. She was likely just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Even her being at the wrong place at the wrong time, what kind of person, like what kind of individual do you have to be to go into a house to break into it, and then along the way just randomly decide, hey, this girl walked in the middle of this, I'm going to burn her alive in her own home. Whoever did all of this is so incredibly dangerous, which is why it is so important to share this case, because there is no telling what this person or these people are capable of. During all of this time, the investigation continued. The sheriff's office continued to investigate. The CBI, FBI, ATF, they all remained on the case, but they also remained very, very tight-lipped. There was essentially nothing at all past what I've already told you that was released to the public. And there are definitely a handful of people out there that are not happy with that. They believe that a lot of these things should be shared. I have even seen a lot of accusations that the sheriff's office should have brought in bigger help sooner. However, the CBI was brought in right away and the FBI within days. It's definitely difficult, and I understand the frustration that more things should be shared, and this is a common thing throughout most true crime cases that I cover, because the more you know, the more you may be able to help or understand what you're seeing and if it might be relevant to the case, and all of these different things. But there's also this flip side and this double-edged sword of wanting to protect the integrity of the investigation. And unfortunately, when a lot of things aren't shared, there's also this assumption that's made that nothing is being done. And it's very, very easy to feel that way when you're not personally seeing any progress. So it's kind of like this give and take between the authorities investigating and the community and the family. In 2018, there was also something that seemed like it could be a huge break. A 20-year-old woman was in her home in Johnston County, Missouri, so we're talking a completely different state, and two suspects broke in and basically demanded the combination to her gun safe. She completely denied, so they tied her up, doused her in gasoline, demanded the combination again, and when she would not give it, they set her on fire and fled the scene. Somehow, some way, this woman was able to extinguish the fire on herself and get the heck out of there to safety. Because this seemed very similar, according to authorities, they decided to head to Missouri to see if there was any sort of connection. Thankfully, the two individuals that were involved were apprehended fairly quickly, and they were both charged with arson and first-degree assault, but after looking into the case, it did not appear there was any sort of connection to Maggie's murder. Over the next 2 years, there were a few other things that happened in the case. 1 year after Maggie's murder and the arson, another roadblock was set up by authorities again to raise more awareness, pass out more flyers, to try to solicit tips. There was also a scholarship that was set up in Maggie's name, and also something pretty big. There were 2 more sketches of suspects released, bringing the total to 3 men and 2 cars that authorities are looking for. So as I stated in the very beginning of this video, at this point, it's not like we have nothing. We have not just one person, but 3 people we're potentially looking for, and then these 2 vehicles. And then finally, on May 18th, 2021, the biggest update in the case, the FBI ended up coming out with some massive news. They were changing the classification of the case. So the FBI announced that the case was being reclassified as a hate crime. And from the way I've seen it described by Maggie's family and the FBI, there was nothing in particular that kind of caused them to do this. Like, there was no evidence found or anything like that that prompted the change. They basically did it so that they would be able to have access to a lot of resources that they otherwise would not be able to. And then obviously we have Maggie's family being Chinese Vietnamese immigrants. They were very established and successful in the community. There's always that possibility that there's someone there that did not like that. But thankfully, again, this allowed a lot more resources. There is a brand new 5-person task force that is on the case, fresh eyes, a new perspective, and hopefully that will lead to answers. FBI Special Agent Michael Schneider said, quote, "The FBI is committed to combating hate crimes and condemns violence directed toward any individual or group. We're grateful for the community's support of Maggie's family and their patience with the ongoing investigation. The FBI continues to work with the Park County Sheriff's Office and the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, and we ask anyone who had information about this murder to contact the FBI immediately. When it comes to family and their feelings on this, her sister Connie said, quote, "It isn't something we had thought about in the past, but knowing how awful the crime was and knowing the details of the crime scene, it makes sense that this was caused by hatred, by someone who thought of us as less than human." Because there seems to be a lack of communication going on, this really did feel like something entirely random, but I really do hope it brings the family answers. In some interviews that I have seen, I was hoping to kind of see progress after this. This did happen again in 2021, so we're at like a year from then. But unfortunately, Maggie's sisters did state in some interviews that there is not a lot of communication between the family and the task force, and they still have pretty much no idea what at all is happening in this investigation. Now, in response, the FBI did say that they do reach out to the family occasionally to reassure them that they're working on the case. This is not going to go cold. It's not something that's going to be forgotten about. But again, the information just needs to be protected. So I do really hope that that is the case. But still, many people really want there to be more released. Years have passed and friends have started to come forward and say things like, we're only getting half of the story. There seems to be either things people know or gut feelings that people in the community have leads them to believe that. And honestly, with the immediate involvement of the CBI and the FBI, I also wonder if there is information that people know, if there was something going on behind the scenes that maybe is just not in the public eye yet. But regardless, nobody will ever forget Maggie or stop fighting for her. Every person in her life thought the absolute world of her, and they refuse to sit back and not let justice play out. I want to make sure that we do our part to raise awareness and help spread her story as far as we possibly can. So hopefully it lands in the hands of someone that has information. As the FBI has stated, it's possible that whoever was involved in this moved away at this point. They could be anywhere. So putting these pictures out there of these three men, these two vehicle descriptions, someone might recognize something. This didn't happen in the middle of the night. This happened in the middle of the day. These people had to go somewhere after. They had to have been somewhere before. Someone out there knows someone that drives one of these cars that was in Bailey or lives around Bailey, matches one of these descriptions, all of a sudden had these guns, all of a sudden had a green safe, all of a sudden had these jade figurines. There's not a moment where I think that there is no one out there that knows exactly who's responsible for this crime, and they maybe just aren't aware of what's going on. I also think it's very likely that the people that did this have done something like this before. Close friend of Maggie said, quote, "I'm sure everyone has told you she was the best of us. Nobody deserves this, but of all the people that it could happen to, she didn't deserve what happened to her." Right now, the reward has been bumped up to $75,000 for any information leading to the arrest and convictions of the individuals that were responsible for the arson and the murder of Maggie Long. Putting the faces out there are absolutely everything. Share the posters with all of those items on them. Share the posters with the different sketches, the different cars. If you are from the Colorado area, share it all around there and all of the surrounding states. These people probably told someone at this point. They said too much. They showed up with all these random items. Someone has information and they just don't know where to connect it to. As always, all of the information that you need, if you have any information on this case, will be listed down below so that you can get that information into the right hands. You can always stay anonymous with situations like this, so don't let that deter you from saying anything. As always, thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to Maggie's story and to support her family as much as we possibly can and help to spread awareness about her case that maybe justice will come sooner rather than later. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Howland fam so we can hopefully bring them home together or bring them justice together, and I will see you guys in my next video.